Hey, what is up, mortals? It is zor-el here, and before we get into today's video, there's something I'd like to say. I'd like to let you all know that we have a merch store. Some of the items in it are available only for a limited amount of time, so if you're interested, go into the description and check it out. Each purchase helps us make more content. Secondly, if this video hits 1,000 likes by the end of the week, we will continue this what if. Thirdly, if you didn't know, only 41.3% of you guys are subscribed to us. So please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon. Now with that out of the way, let's get into the story. Before his fight with that heroic fool, All Might, All for One, the very symbol of evil in the world, had many connections, eyes and ears everywhere in Japan. His influence used to permeate the very core of society itself, but with the damage his body sustained, he was forced to scale down his operations and work in the shadows. Recent rumors caught All for One's ear that All Might's operations were moving further and further from the normal areas near his agency. It was increasingly obvious by looking at the data that U.A High was being frequented by the #1 hero. However, given the security that the school is known for, he would need a mole on the inside to gather information. Throughout his past, and especially during the process of perfecting the creation of his Nomu, All for One kept a close eye on the National Quirk Registry of school-age children for any notable quirks. Even if he couldn't manipulate them into following him, he could always use them as Nomu, or simply steal their quirks himself. One such child that caught his eye was a young Katsuki Bakugo, who possessed a rather powerful explosion-based quirk. However, only a short time after the boy was put under surveillance, it became clear that he was far too headstrong to manipulate easily. He was also always around other kids, and given how often his parents were around, there was little opportunity to kidnap him either. Fortunately, All for One's time was not entirely wasted on him, as he witnessed much of Bakugo's incessant bullying of his quirkless classmate and ex-friend, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku was in many ways the opposite of Bakugo, timid, weak, and looked down upon by his classmates. One of the few things they did share in common was their drive to become heroes. All for One finished reading the report his underlings put together on Izuku. He had a sinister smirk under his mask. He would let this boy achieve his goal and play hero for a while, in exchange for helping tear down the symbol of peace he admired so very much. A short time later, Izuku found himself walking home alone, lost in his own thoughts. That day had been especially rough for him. The whole class laughed at me for trying to get into UA. Kachan told me to do the unthinkable and even blew up my hero journal. How could this day get any worse? Well, no matter. I've just gotta keep a smile on my face. Just like All Might! Izuku declared to himself, raising an arm high and letting out a bellowing laugh, imitating his favorite hero. As he began to walk through the dark underpass, his busy train of thought had distracted him from a partially opened sewer grate. His thoughts were quickly interrupted as a menacing voice rang out from behind him, and the vicious green goo of his assailant swept up and surrounded his body, beginning to suffocate him. He attempted to tear the villain off of him, but his escape attempts were in vain, as the slickness of its liquid body prevented him from getting a grip on it. As his air supply depleted, his vision grew dark, and every part of Izuku's body screamed at him to resist, but he had no more strength left. Suddenly, a gust of wind pressure blew the villain off of him, just as his body gave out and he fell unconscious. Upon waking, he finds that All Might had rescued him, but was already preparing to leave. Izuku was still dazed from the ordeal, and had so many thoughts racing through his head that by the time he collected himself and found out All Might had already signed his journal, All Might said that he must take the villain to the police. There was still one thing he needed from All Might, questions that he desperately needed the answers to. Just as he was about to leap into the air, Izuku lunged and tried to grab at All Might's leg before his idol could leap, but lost his grip due to the force of the jump. Izuku was disappointed that he couldn't ask All Might whether or not to be a hero, even if he was quirkless, but was still grateful that he saved his life, just in the nick of time. Unbeknownst to him, his attempt to grab onto All Might's leg dislodged the sludge villain from his pocket, and the bottles containing him fell onto the streets below. Wanting to get home quickly, Izuku continued along the shortcut and arrived to see his mother watching the local news. What he saw both shocked and horrified him. On the TV was the very same villain that had attacked him, and worse yet, he had taken someone else hostage. There's no way the number one hero could have lost against a weak villain like that, so how did... Wait, when he tried grabbing onto All Might, did he... Oh no. This was all his fault. If only he hadn't been so selfish and just understood that All Might is a busy man who doesn't always have time for questioning. The camera zoomed in closer and caught a glimpse of the hostage. It was his classmate and former friend, Kacchan. The look of terror and helplessness in his eyes simply broke Izuku. As a flood of tears fell down his face, his mother tried comforting him. He tried to sputter out what had happened earlier, but the guilt and pain were too strong to form any semblance of a complete thought. As the emotions overwhelmed him, he retreated into his bedroom. Izuku collapsed into bed and buried his face in his pillow, his mind racing uncontrollably. This was a wake-up call to him. Maybe he couldn't be a hero. After all, look at what he caused with his carelessness. Meanwhile, Bakugo struggled to stay conscious as his airway was cut off by the villain trying to hijack his body. As his vision grew dark, he let out one last barrage of huge explosions that shook the ground, causing some of the heroes and bystanders down the alley to stumble. The villain's grasp on him loosened just long enough for him to take a large breath and yell out, "Why are you just standing there? Aren't you supposed to be heroes?" Suddenly, All Might burst onto the scene and threw a punch so strong that the air pressure sent the villain flying, just like when he rescued Izuku. As Bakugo collapsed on the ground from exhaustion, a light rain began to fall. The weather itself changed by the force of the punch. Just as quickly as All Might arrived, he had disappeared by the time Bakugo had awoken. Before we get back into the story, I would like to say that we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes over the hard facts of the anime presented. Now, in case you guys didn't know, we have a third channel called We the Celestial Naruto What If. We the Celestial Naruto What If mainly focuses on our Naruto What If series. If you are interested in content like this, please go check the description below or click the eye icon in the top right corner. Now with that out of the way, let's get back to the story. The next few days of school were especially difficult for Izuku. Even through the bullying, he couldn't bring himself to even look at Bakugo. Shortly after the incident, All for One noticed that Izuku's personality had changed. He was far more timid than usual, and in his depressed state, seemed to be avoiding any socialization. And All for One decided that this was a good time to strike and start using the boy. It was rather unlike him to take on matters personally, but he needed this done right to ensure future success. First, however, he would need a quirk to disguise his appearance. Shortly thereafter, Izuku was approached by a noticeably tall man on his way home after school. "Excuse me, are you Izuku Midoriya?" the man inquired. He was dressed in a somewhat ill-fitting business suit but wore no tie. Yes, sir? Was there something you needed?" All for One looked at the young boy, whose eyes were still filled with guilt and sadness. This would be an easier task than he thought. "Why, yes, there is. I am a talent agent of sorts, from a research company based in Tokyo. We are looking to back the careers and educations of young hero hopefuls." Izuku looked at the man in confusion. The man's voice was somewhat gruff, but he didn't sense any ill will behind it. And you think I'm qualified? I'm quirkless. I don't even know if I could become a hero." He was certainly intrigued at what the man had to say, but was equally uneasy about the situation. "You were sought out partially because you are quirkless, as well as your academic skills. You must keep this secret. But we have discovered a procedure shown to bring out latent quirks in some quirkless individuals." The implications of this had shocked Izuku. It could mean that he had a chance to develop a quirk after all. He had so many questions, but the man told him that they would have to wait to discuss the finer details until later. Seeing as he was still a child, All for One knew he would also have to convince the boy's mother to go along with this as well. The two exchanged contact information, and a meeting was arranged at the Midoriya household a few days later. All for One, still in disguise, visited to discuss the terms of the agreement and what the procedure would entail. You see, the quirks of some individuals manifest or intensify during times of great stress, What the procedure will be doing is stimulating your body into a false sense of stress to release adrenaline. If you possess a latent quirk, it may force it to surface, All for One said with a fake but convincingly warm smile. He must inspire confidence and trust in these two for them to fall under his influence. I don't know about this, Izuku. It sounds dangerous. And are you sure this is safe, mister? Inko's face was flushed with worry. I'm sure we'll be fine, Mom. If this opportunity gives me a better chance at being the best hero I can be, I have to take it. Izuku wasn't all that confident about it himself, but with the immense guilt hanging over him, he knew that this would be the only way to try and make up for letting the villain escape. While there naturally would be some great risks to putting the body under great stress, Izuku is young and in good health. Additionally, he will be in a hospital with medical staff on hand to assist should any issues arise. As for complications afterward, it seems that the body produces more adrenaline and growth hormones. What this means is that he may grow taller and have more muscle mass, but may be more fatigued overall as his body needs more energy. Of course, this was a lie. The procedure would be of an entirely different nature, and any side effects would simply be a result of the quirks he gives the boy. However, using his connections to acquire a quiet hospital room and a doctor gives a decent cover story, as well as a feeling of security to Izuku and his mother. But nothing harmful though, right? Inko still wore an uncertain look. All for One expected a protective parent, but she was more than he expected. Of course, any long-term effects should be mostly beneficial, save for the fatigue I mentioned. A few other things to note. Since this is experimental, you must sign a non-disclosure agreement saying you will keep it a secret, unless given explicit permission. Additionally, should it be a success and Izuku does develop a quirk, we shall pay any tuition fees for his future hero courses that he enrolls in. Using a legal agreement would be a simple and effective way to keep their mouths sealed. Paying for the school fees also allows him to keep their leash somewhat tight. While Izuku's absentee father does send money from overseas, All for One can easily tell from their living arrangements that they are not particularly wealthy. I've made up my mind, Mom. I need to go through with this. I know you worry about me, but I can't just let a chance at my dream slip away. Izuku's voice rang with resolve and confidence that his mother hadn't heard for what seemed like forever. And with that, Izuku's mother reluctantly accepted her son's wishes. Thankfully for All for One, they hadn't thought to ask for a copy of the contract they just signed. The less paper trail back to one of his connections, the harder it will be to trace it back to him. It took about a week for everything to line up. Getting a trustworthy doctor paid off wasn't the simplest of tasks, even for All for One. Izuku was informed to catch a train into a nearby city with a larger hospital. Since All Might was operating more and more in the boys' area, taking him further away would also serve to keep things under wraps. After a short ride, Izuku hopped off the train and made his way to the hospital, quickly checking in and being taken to an operating room. All for One was sitting on a bench outside of the room, awaiting his arrival. Ah, yes, greetings, young Izuku. I didn't want to miss seeing the results of the procedure after all. I hope it is a resounding success for you. All for One didn't care much for smiling, at least not since All Might made it his motif. But it was necessary. If he were to drop the act, then he might accidentally raise a few red flags and tip the boy off to his true nature. Thank you, sir! I'm really nervous, but if I want to become a hero, I have to put on a brave face and smile, even if things are scary. Izuku's face was brimming with energy and unease, but his smile held steady as the man left the room. The doctor explained that he would need to be put under anesthetic, and that his memory might be hazy for a while after waking up. Izuku went to change into a hospital gown, and came back to find a nurse in place of the doctor. She took his vitals and had him lay down on the operating table, preparing him for the anesthetic. The next couple of hours were a complete blur to Izuku, and he was never quite sure what happened during the procedure itself. After the boy had been put under, All for One re-entered the room with a small red cooler, placing it on a counter and motioning to the doctor. In this container are a pair of eyes. You will be performing a transplant on the boy. Do not worry about leaving cuts or scars. I shall heal them myself before he wakes up. Normally, It took extensive surgery and preparation to give someone multiple quirks without facing severe drawbacks. Time was of the essence, of course, and turning this boy into a mindless Nomu would defeat the purpose of what he's meant to become. Luckily, he had ample time to prepare a suite of quirks that Izuku's currently weak and quirkless body should be able to handle, with little issue. When it comes to mutant-type quirks, usually he cannot transfer them from person to person without causing severe strain on their bodies. There is only one way around this, as when they are isolated in a specific organ, such as the eyes, it is possible to transplant both the organ as well as the quirk. This isolation also aids the boy's body in handling and processing multiple quirks. It would be a strain on him for sure, but not enough to require the augmentations of a Nomu. As for the other two quirks, well, they should end up combining not unlike his rivals One for All, though not nearly to the same effect. While the doctor is busy performing the eye transplant, All for One places a tracker and bug into Izuku's phone. Anything said near the boy should be picked up and recorded by it, meaning all the intel he should need will be sent without him even knowing. After the surgery is finished, All for One bestows the 3 quirks on him. Thanks to the anesthetic he was under, the seizure caused by this newfound stress on him was minor. After a minute or so of regeneration from All for One's quirks, no evidence remained that any surgery had even taken place on him. When Izuku awoke, his whole body felt dull and achy, as if he had run a marathon and had depleted every bit of energy he had. Hey, doctor, did it work? Izuku groaned out, struggling to sit up. Finally, hearing the boy awake, All for One peeked his head into the door. The doctor stepped out for a while. How do you feel? My head hurts and I'm exhausted. Hopefully that's a good thing, but it certainly doesn't feel like it. Well, if it's any consolation, I believe the procedure worked. If your eyes are an indication, at least. Izuku quickly scurried to his feet, almost falling due to the weakness of his legs, and went over to a mirror on the other side of the room. Examining his eyes, he could see that they completely changed. His eyes, once an emerald green similar to his hair, now shone a brilliant orange. This was it. His quirk. He still had no idea what it was, but it was of his own. And now he could be the hero he dreamed of. A nearly inhuman amount of tears began streaming down the boy's face, but All for One could see that the boy now stood taller. Just finding out that he had a quirk already had done wonders for his confidence. All for One knew that with the set of abilities granted to him, there should be no chance of him failing the UA entrance exam. Thank you all for watching the video to the end. Now there are a few more things that I would like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and the editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you like the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have a fantastic day.